Good morning, everyone. It's 11 o'clock, time to convene the meeting. Welcome, everybody, to the November meeting. I think, Pat, you'll go ahead and call roll call now.
Yes, good morning, everyone. City of Avondale, Harold Seguina. City of Buckeye, Dan Cotterman. James Shano or John Willett. City of Chandler, Ryan Peters. Is there anyone from City of El Mirage on the call today? Town of Fountain Hills, Dave Trimble.
Here.
Town of Gilbert, Mary Goodman. City of Glendale, Kevin Phelps.
Here.
City of Goodyear, Winnette Reed.
Present.
Maricopa County, Sean Pierce. City of Mesa, Chris Brady.
Here.
City of Peoria, Kevin Burke. City of Phoenix, Mario Paniagua.
Here.
Town of Queen Creek, Bruce Gardner.
Here.
City of Scottsdale, Mark Melanchenko.
Here.
City of Surprise, Tracy Montgomery. And City of Tempe, Rose and Chelsea.
Present. Thank you.
Chair, we can proceed.
Thank you, Pat. Just a reminder, and I'm reminding myself to mute your phones and your microphones unless you have something you want to speak about. And I just muted mine. So time for public comment. The public will be provided an opportunity at this time to address the committees on non-agenda items and all action agenda items for the joint RPTA and VMR meeting agendas. Up to 3 minutes will be provided per speaker. Do we have a speaker card?
Mr. Crowley.
Mr. Crowley?
And it says up to 15 for many and request extra.
I understand. Thank you.
The agenda items I'm going to address are your strategic plan, also your extension, and also one on the rail. And with the strategic plan, I've never seen so much BS in my life when I went to that retreat, because the strategic plan would be addressing that you guys are going to have a change in funding at the end of 2025. And all you did at that one was, instead of addressing the bus and such, and how many of your cities have rail, the main thing you want to do is double the size of Allied Burton and do nothing about what the future does hold. With the current legislation, if that passes, you're going to be having to only give 3.5% of your whole amount of allotment. And I remember, though, on the last document that they put forth, you guys had in there $1 billion for maintenance of the rail. So if it was $1 billion then, and you're not going to be coming close to doing $1 billion now, why aren't you planning for that? And like in here, it says on item 1C and 1D, it's for maintenance and that, and a 5-year contract. I can see that ones, but the other ones that you're doing that are extended into, such as the one that you had last month for repairs and fixes of everything. And one of the things you had on there was bus stops. You don't do bus stops. You just repair them. So when you put it in there, it gives the public and the board a false sense that you're actually doing something. I was one of the ones that wrote the Prop 400. in it for the extension of the routes. It was in there to where you could have then done Tonopah. It had Queen Creek in it, and there was Wickenburg. Those have been taken out. Why? Because the state and you guys said not worth the funding. Where I see with what you're doing with the one in Ajo, it should be more than just a little extensions into Buckeye. Buckeye needs a circulator that meets up with that. With the jurisdictional equity of what they're saying, all the things they're doing, I don't see a plan for the Prop 400 bus part. If I don't see one that is aggressive in getting each of your communities the amount of money it needs to do both circulator and connectors, I'll be campaigning against it. And if you think that cutting off the money for the rail is a sensitivity you don't have to deal with, if they don't pass that, you have no money at all. Good luck.
Thank you. Now's the time for the Chief Executive Officer's report. Jessica?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committees. I'd like to provide you with brief updates on a number of items happening at Valley Metro. First is a ridership update beginning with the month of September. We're continuing to see a little bit of growth in ridership, primarily attributed to the return of school and fall activities across the valley. Ridership growth is not returning, however, at a rate as quick as we would expect. We are seeing strong ridership on the Tempe streetcar. Light rail ridership in September rose about 10% year over year. But in August, light rail ridership rose 21% year over year, and we're continuing to see stagnation in bus service. We do expect to have a strong month of October. For rail ridership, we'll continue to monitor this, and we're having conversations with cities and preparing for potential bus service changes to help reinvigorate ridership and demand in our regional bus system. Next slide, please. Earlier last month, we had the opportunity to celebrate at our annual Clean Air Campaign Awards. This is an opportunity to celebrate the many individuals, companies, and managers who support alternatives to single occupancy vehicle commuting across the valley. We celebrate with people who are riding 25 miles one way on their bicycle to work. We also recognize the communities of Goodyear, Avondale, and Surprise for their microtransit that's pictured here in this program. And we celebrated our many van pool programs. That's an important part of the Valley Metro operation and organization that we don't hear as much about as we do our bus, paratransit, and rail system. So wonderful event. And thank you to our many board members and city staff that attended the event. On yesterday, we hosted the Incident Centered Care and Enforcement Program. This is a consortium that Valley Metro has been running since 2017. This is an opportunity for first responders from across the region to come together and discuss practices for better responding to our vulnerable populations. This is a very important and timely topic at this moment as we struggle to respond to the different needs facing our many communities since the COVID-19 pandemic. So kudos to Adrienne Reese and her team for conducting that ISEP meeting yesterday. Last month, we celebrated the unveiling of one of our first South Central Extension Art Grants Programs Award. This is a mural at the Lowell Elementary School. This Lowell Tiger, which was actually selected by the student population at Lowell School, was painted by a Chicano artist and was unveiled as one of those first programs. To date, by the way, we have awarded about $75,000 in grants. These are small grants. Many of them are focused on schools and community centers. We also have performance art, music, all of it focused along that South Central corridor with heavy community engagement. This is the first program of its kind. We have a wonderful arts grants program associated with our capital projects. Many of that includes local, national, and international artists, but this is really art that is community focused and community delivered. So kudos to the artists and the wonderful students at Lowell School. We are getting ready for Northwest Extension Phase 2 to open. We are targeting an early 2024 opening date, and as such, we have begun pre-revenue testing, as well as drills and exercises. We had a major drill on Friday, October 20th, in which we simulated a smoking train that had to be evacuated on the elevated section of bridge over I-17. We partnered with our local law enforcement and first responders, as well as media outlets, so we didn't create too much of a stir with a smoking train over the interstate. So it was good coverage for us, and I think building toward the momentum of the opening, but more importantly, this gave our first responders the opportunity to practice an evacuation of a train on that elevated structure. Well done again to our team and our partners. We're also beginning, next slide, please, Stephanie, our system integration testing on Northwest Phase 2. And what this really means is we're testing the design and constructability. We're actually running trains now on that track. So you'll continue to see this testing take shape over the course of the next couple of months. And ultimately we'll shift from testing to training for our new operators. And we're working with ACI, our light rail operator, to resource up, as well as Allied Universal Security to resource up to support the delivery of light rail service and security. It's a big time for the Valley, but it's also a big time for light rail as we're moving through the World Series. Light rail has really been a darling in some of the media outlets. We are carrying packed trains. Our operations team, Mike Powell and Christopher Ramirez, are here today, are doing a wonderful job, as well as our safety and security team, making sure our customers are getting to and from the ball game safely and securely. We are moving people to and from Chase Field pretty fast. They've got 2 and 3 car consists lined up, ready to bring people to and from the baseball game. A lot of great media coverage for us, as well as just a wonderful economic infusion for the Valley. Looking ahead, we do have our Audit Finance Subcommittee tomorrow, and I want to note that our November board meeting date has changed due to a conflict with the League of Cities and Towns. We'll now be meeting on November 30th. That's going to be that Thursday after Thanksgiving week. We'll include a study session focused on strategic plan at the top of that meeting. It will be important to maximize our in-person participation from the board on that date so that we can move through that strat plan. There are some board members we know that won't be able to participate on that date. And so I'm working to set one-on-one meetings with those board members so that we can ensure we're getting their feedback prior to bringing the final draft strat plan back to the board in the month of January. At this point, we do not have a December board cycle on the calendar. That concludes my update, Madam Chair. Are there any questions I may answer?
Any questions? I'm not seeing anybody online requesting to speak, so thank you, Jessica. So next, minutes from the October 4th joint TMC RMC meeting are presented for approval. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing any. I request a motion and a second to approve the October 4th meeting minutes.
Move approval. Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. Jessica, would you please introduce this next item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to invite Michael Walrow, our Chief Legal Officer, to address the issue of our insurance renewal.
Thank you. Yesterday, we sent out a packet and memo kind of detailing what the insurance renewal looks like for this year. Every year, November comes around with cooler temperatures and we have to renew our insurance. No different this year. The changes to the insurance overall, you're looking at about a 16% increase. That chiefly comes from the expansion of property for Valley Metro, not because of exposures or liabilities that we've had. There does continue to be tightness in the insurance market, in the economy in general. The amounts that we have presented right now are not to exceed amounts because our broker will continue to negotiate rates up until the board meeting on the 30th. And so we should have final numbers by then. What we've usually seen year over year is those amounts go a little bit down due to the continued negotiation. And so we don't usually have to go over that not to exceed amount. That hasn't been a problem in years past. You'll see in the packets that you were given the trends for the last 5 years on our insurance costs. The average amount of increase over the past 5 years has been about 21%. So we're within the average, a little bit below the average of this year. You'll see those continue to spike over the next few years as we add in our big new projects because they represent a lot of property coming into the system. We also did an actuarial report that's being finalized right now as we look into the possibility of having discussions with our members about doing some self-insurance on some of our lines. And so that will be a discussion that continues into this year, into the next year, and we might have some different recommendations next year as to where we reposition some of our insurance lines. I'm happy to take any questions. Your staffs have the same packet. They were all sent yesterday. We can also answer questions at AFS and then continue to answer questions or take any input and comment before we go to the board on the 30th.
Are there any questions? I am not seeing any, so I am looking for a motion and a second to forward to the Board of Directors authorization for the CEO to purchase renewal coverage for Valley Metro's insurance needs as follows. Commercial property and liability insurance coverage, including workers' compensation and employers' liability from December 1st, 2023 to November 30th, 2024 for an amount not to exceed $6,790,207. RPTA's obligation will not exceed $414,008. VMR's obligation will not exceed $6,376,199.
I'll move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, next item is the strategic plan development. And Jessica, will you introduce this item, please?
I will. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. The purpose of this item is to provide this committee with an update on the strategic planning process and provide the opportunity to solicit your input on the plan development before we go to the board with that study session later this month. The content that you will see today is an update based on feedback from the board that we received during our October retreat. We have developed 5 key pillars, associated strategies and tactics. We did have an executive leadership team retreat last week focused on refining those tactics. You'll see some of that content today. The content today will be presented to you by Jim Hilliard of Valley Metro, but also the Guidehouse consultant team. They'll be with us for the board study session. And then in the month of January, as we move toward adoption of the strategic plan, Valley Metro staff will take the baton, if you will, from Guidehouse at that point and be prepared to move through implementation. I do want to note that the strategic plan is in parallel to other planning and programming processes that exist within the organization, including our long-range financial plan. So the financial strategy is foundational to the strategic plan. However, it is not within the scope that we have with Guidehouse, as are a number of other items, including development of long-range capital infrastructure plans, as well as long-range service plans. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jim Hilliard, who's actually joining us virtually today, and the Guidehouse team. Jim, are you with us?
I am, Jessica. Thank you. Forgive me all. I'm off sick today, so I'll simply hand it off to Rob Hager from Guidehouse to take you through their incorporation of your feedback.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jessica and Madam Chair, for this opportunity to present an update on our strategic plan and the work that we've been doing with Valley Metro. So just joining me are a couple of my colleagues on this project, but I am Rob Hager, the Director and Project Manager over the work that we've been doing with Valley Metro. Next slide, please. We are going to run through the work that's been done to date, the current and future assessment that Guidehouse has performed in concert and partnership with Valley Metro, the strategic framework that has emerged from that assessment, and a summary of our recent board retreat and the takeaways from that. And then we'll have questions to close. Next slide, please. Thank you. So to begin this project, our team did a current state assessment of Valley Metro and the sort of larger macro forces, both across the nation and in the local area, Phoenix region. And what we captured here was just a representation of the change in the nature of transit ridership, pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic. And just seeing that due to sort of riders leaving the system, impacts outside of Valley Metro's control, such as changes in the economy, that has had effects on the ridership. And so we saw those effects across the nation as well, changes in commuter patterns, changes in unsheltered populations, and changes in the economy and workforce. And looking at those macro events, we also looked at how they are impacting Valley Metro specifically, and how what those events look like on a more regional scale. Next slide, please. And so that is what this slide represents. We're seeing sort of the changes in ridership in comparison to the national average, and comparison to Valley Metro's peers. We're also seeing changes in commuting patterns in the Phoenix area, as well as impacts in terms of the unhoused population and the local workforce. And all of these things are definitely having sort of effects on the ridership, and that's where we kind of look in greater detail. Next slide, please. So we also broke down the ridership population into these four areas: multipurpose riders, so those riders without access to their own vehicle; choice riders who do have access to a vehicle; former riders who by definition used Valley Metro services formerly but no longer do; and then non-riders, those who have not used public transit or Valley Metro services. And we extrapolated that out based on some survey data that we did to a larger population. But really what we're looking to understand from these population groups are, what are their needs and expectations in terms of serving them, what should be prioritized going forward, and in terms of that prioritization, what kind of initiatives or organizational improvements need to take place. Next slide, please. We also looked at those rider populations and really did detailed sentiment analysis around what has been their experience among various sort of attributes, if you will, and those are detailed here in this spider diagram. And you can see based on those different rider profiles, there are different preferences. I won't go into detail through all of them, but you can see that for multi-purpose riders, they're most sensitive to issues such as availability, reliability, cleanliness, security, because they're using it most frequently. For choice riders, they're seeing that their preferences or sensitivities are really around availability, app use, and transfers. And then for those former riders, we can see that there's some strong sentiments around availability, security, cleanliness, etc. So something we hypothesize pushed them into becoming former riders, maybe around availability or cleanliness, etc. Next slide, please. And then we also thought about the strategic implications of these groups. So obviously it would be our desire to grow ridership. So thinking about those various subsets, what can be done to grow the ridership in those areas. And that's what we've detailed here on the far right side. So in terms of, in the short term, there can be things such as operational improvements for targeting choice riders, thinking about things as adapting transit to their needs. And on the medium and long term, looking at what can be done to bring former riders or non-riders into the system. Next slide, please. So with that kind of current state assessment established, we looked next to developing a future state assessment and really looking at, okay, well, given our understanding of the needs of Valley Metro, and what are the sort of future trends that we're looking at, and also what we'll look at in a second is what are other transit agencies doing to plan for these future trends or respond to them. And we looked at the future in three kind of key areas: the age profile of riders, geographic growth, and then the use. And what we see are changes in the riding profile based on just changes to the demographics and changes to individuals taking driver's licenses, for example. We also looked at geographic growth and long-range planning by groups such as MAG. I do want to caveat here that we are familiar with the recent decision around restrictions to development and water usage. We also looked at areas such as riding times or peak usage. And so with that sort of data in mind, we also thought about the strategic implications. So how can Valley Metro respond and plan for these changes that are expected to occur in the future? Next slide, please. And as I mentioned earlier, we looked at what other peer agencies are doing to address kind of the similar opportunities and perhaps threats to increasing ridership and giving that excellent rider experience. And so our team interviewed and reached out to numerous transit agencies and talked to them about things such as the rider experience, data exchanges, multi-modal hubs, for example, community engagement, etc. And so our team has also pulled those best practices and to help inform the development of the strategic plan. Next slide, please. And so when we looked at all of this data from the current state and the future state, what we identified were some key areas for Valley Metro to focus on from a strategic perspective. First and definitely foremost is delivering an excellent customer experience. But supporting that, we identified 4 other priority areas: investing in talent, prioritizing security, leveraging best practices and innovations in data and technology, and then delivering on stakeholder collaboration. But also to make sure that these priority areas are can be implemented by the organization, we identified other key organizational elements that we feel are sort of prerequisite, if you will, to making sure that those priorities can be enacted. Those are having clear mission and objectives, having strong leadership, defined governance, operational excellence, and financial sustainability. Next slide, please. So we also put these priorities and these prerequisites into a framework, if you will, and that's the visualization that I'll go through next. At the very top of this strategic framework is the Valley Metro's mission. So what the organization is ultimately seeking to accomplish: connecting communities and enhancing lives. Next. We see our first and foremost goal of delivering excellent customer experience. And then next. And here are our priorities, or our pillars, if you will, that are going to help Valley Metro achieve its goal and ultimately its mission: investing in talent, data and technology, prioritizing security, and delivering on stakeholder collaboration. Next. So we've detailed out here investing in talent. That's, to provide excellent customer service, we believe that Valley Metro's employees must be equipped and motivated, and with that comes training, skills development, career planning, etc. Next slide. And then with prioritizing security on transit, it's really about developing partnerships, working with local organizations, and also thinking about new and innovative ways of creating a safer space. Next slide. Or next, please. Thank you. And then when we think about data and technology, it's looking at operations and how can data and technology best be leveraged to improve operations and Valley Metro's understanding of its data. Next. And then stakeholder collaboration, making sure that strategic choices and decisions are being worked on with key partners within the community to make sure those initiatives and ultimately the work of Valley Metro is being effectively carried out. Sorry, next slide. Or next section. So the foundational elements, I'll go through the 3 very quickly. Strong leadership, obviously critical to making sure that these pillars are enacted and governed. Next. And then, so this is the full strategic plan. Just board governance, self-explanatory, operational excellence, also pretty self-explanatory, but both of those very critical to making sure those pillars are enacted effectively. So this in completion is the strategic framework. And next we'll talk about board member feedback. So when we presented this strategic framework to the board, we talked about these areas and really kind of what perspectives they had, what sort of desires that they had. And what we just represent here are some of the just select quotes from the board. But what I also want to focus on are the initial takeaways that we had. The board was in agreement that delivering customer experience was the top priority, but they also had certain things that they thought about first and foremost in terms of the pillars and overall what could be done to improve regional transit in the greater regional area. And so these are just kind of a few of the key takeaways that we had from that session. And I don't think I'll go through every single one, but that's just basically the summation of what our working session with the board entailed. Happy to take questions.
Any questions? Great presentation. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, yes. Mr. Brady?
Just a few questions. Thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
In your comments, you made some comment about you're aware of the water concerns or something related to growth.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what that was referring to because
Oh,
I'm not aware of how that's impacting growth in the metropolitan area. So maybe coming from outside Arizona, you have a different perception. So can you share with me what your thoughts are about that?
sure. So we can go back to the slide showing the future trends, and that
And
will.
If-
Go
if
ahead,
I
Jessica,
may,
if you want.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Brady, I do want to indicate that we don't do growth projections here at Valley Metro, so we are relying on the region's growth projections.
Okay. Well, there was a reference, something about water, and I didn't know how that was playing into this strategic plan. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, just to be clear, we're not taking that as a sort of an input into our strategic plan. I just meant to clarify that what we see here in the middle row is a projection from Maricopa Association of Governments on future growth expected to occur into 2060. That projection was done before my understanding is a ruling or regulation on development related to water. So it might
Yeah.
imply that there's going
That's
to be more.
exactly what I was afraid you said. I think you probably better go back and research that because it has,
Okay.
as far as the major cities that are using Valley Metro, this doesn't have any impact on the future of growth and development and the density. So, and I wouldn't want you to say that in front of a bunch of elected officials because that might not go over very well. So that's a perception that we keep. And Kevin, I just came from another meeting where GPEC had this conversation with our private sector industries. And please don't repeat it until you get a little more informed about what that really means for this area. So that's the first thing I wanted to say, because I don't think anybody wants to be talking about that out of context. Can we go back to you? And I appreciated the way you've broken this down. So you've got the multi-users, what is it called? Choice
Riders.
Choice riders. And then the last one was, what is it called? Less frequent or
Former riders, maybe.
well, yeah. And I think you're right. I think the multi-users today, the ones that are kind of the always everyday using this, I think obviously the conditions of that ride experience is really, really important. But I think I'm not suggesting that needs to be given way to anything else, but I think you've got to maintain your base, right? That's continue to use your services. But I think where we really fall short is that if that experience isn't a great experience for someone who uses it rarely or infrequently, maybe only for a special event, maybe that's the only time they use it to go to a major activity. And if that experience doesn't meet their expectations, then they're probably not going to get on Valley Metro again. And I've had some of those experiences, and I think we just have to make sure that when we have the opportunity to get people, whether, almost a forced choice to get on Valley Metro because of parking and things like that. And I think Valley Metro does a great job promoting itself as an option, but sometimes that experience can be challenging. And I think we've just got to figure out, this is the opportunity to grow the base by showing that this can be a easy, comfortable ride, and you're not going to go 3/4 away and then everybody has to get off the train and then you have to wait for another train to come or whatever. So I would just say that's a strategy, is not only maintaining the base, but it's how do we grow the opportunity when we have people are using this, like, again, maybe once or twice a year. So they get on and they go, wow, that was really convenient. I'm going to do that again. And then the third thing that you mentioned here, which I think is really critical, and I don't know where this is headed, and maybe that's just something part of a strategic plan, but I really like the idea that we have to break down transit and to get to that micro transit options, and what role can Valley Metro plan. That I think that's going to be, I think that's just, I think the tendency is less about being in that bulk transit. I think that for some reason that for people, they're not comfortable with that. And it doesn't always meet their needs because it's not going where they need to go, whether it's for employment or work or education. So I think it would be interesting as we keep developing out microtransit options to feed into the larger systems. I think is a great idea. I think that's something that will create, I think for the future, that's going to be great value for Valley Metro. So anyway, thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Phelps?
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions. One, we've seen the decrease in ridership, and then you have kind of three groups. You have multi-purpose, choice, and former. Do we know where the largest amount of fallout was on our decreased ridership? Was it our multi-purpose not using it as often, or choice not using it as often, or is most of that decline in ridership, has it come from the former category?
That's a good question.
I'd be happy to take that, Rob.
Sure, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. So much of the lost ridership has come from the choice riders who have other alternatives. We've also seen a shift from our multi-purpose riders into the choice rider category as we've seen more and more households acquire access to an automobile. So they've gone from riders without access to a vehicle to riders with access to a vehicle. So we've also seen some former riders that have not used transit, and survey data that we actually conducted in late 2022, early 2023 really helped illuminate that experience. And it goes to what Mr. Brady was saying about service quality. The number one thing that we heard from our riders is our former riders as reasons why not to ride or reasons they might want to leave the system for our current riders was reliability of service. Does the bus or the train show up when it is scheduled? Does it get me to where I want to go? And then number two was security. Do I feel secure riding the system? So we saw movement from multi-purpose into choice and then a fall off. And then we saw a big fall off in choice. Looking at the ridership at a finer scale, we're also seeing a big reduction in peak period commutes into the downtown area. The way our system has been designed for a long time, we've got express and rapid buses that are focused on downtown, and we're seeing even a higher than a national average rate of telecommuting here in the Valley by virtue of the kinds of jobs that we have in the large geography of our metropolitan area. A lot of people are finding it convenient not to take that journey to work. So what that tells us is we've got to improve service quality. We've got to show up when people need to get there. We've got to create a safe and secure environment. And we've got to think of the full array of trip making, including, but not just the journey to work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 with a downtown orientation. And then to Mr. Brady's point on microtransit, we've got to begin thinking about our system as more of a mobility marketplace. Yes, we deliver fixed route service, and that's going to continue to be our most efficient way to carry people, especially where we have dense land use and where we're carrying a lot of people. That's bus, that's light rail, that is streetcar, but we've got a lot of communities where we are just not able to operate the service frequency. You're not going to get a 15 to 20 minute service frequency because of density and demand. So maybe there are different solutions that we need to deliver, and that's going to help us get at each of those ridership groups.
If I can continue. So yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is one, there's a total number of rides have decreased because of the post-pandemic impact. So then, then there are certain factors there that are outside of the control of Valley Metro. So if more people are doing a hybrid or work from home, you can't force them to give that up, but that's what their employer is asking to do. So you got kind of that challenge there. And then you have on the other end, you have people that within the trips that are happening, some are now using something other than transit at which to complete those trips. And I think the challenge is on the strategic plan is where do you focus your efforts and resources that will gain the most amount of traction? And I guess that would be the part that, if you don't know, I would be studying is how successful, what's the cost to bring back a former rider versus the cost of moving a choice rider into a multi-purpose or to increase the number of trips. And I'm sure as you kind of move forward on this, that you'd want to be looking at that component. So you're not spending $10 again, just to have a nominal impact on the ridership. So that then kind of begs me to the next question is where are you going to go from here? What's the next part of the strategic plan development in terms of setting your benchmarks and how you're going to measure that? And so where are we at in this process?
Sure. So we have developed draft tactics. So those are the specific project areas that would fall under each of these pillars and then the strategy. So specific action items that we would execute over a 5-year period. This is a 5-year time-bound program. And it also ties back to other activities outside of strategic plan, including our forthcoming comprehensive operational analysis. And what that is an evaluation of the existing system. Where are we doing well in terms of performance and productivity? How do we need to adapt the system to meet the changing and evolving needs of our service area into the future? And that'll also have about a 5-year horizon. So this connects back to it. Operational excellence elements are also in there because we know that none of this works out if the bus doesn't show up when and where we say it's going to show up.
And maybe you said it and I didn't catch, but in terms of then setting your targets and your goals. So let's take one of them is improve customer service. So do you have as part of your plan, do you have a process for how you're going to measure first, what will it take to improve your customer service? And when will you know whether those initiatives that are supporting the strategic plan be successful?
Yeah, thank you. So we've identified the tactics and now the next step for us is to identify how we'll measure them and what our targets are over time, over the course of that 5-year period. And that's what we'll be able to bring back to this board in January.
Okay.
Yeah, I am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One question I had to do with kind of the area that's not talked about today, but I do see it in the plan, in the foundational elements, the financial sustainability. So there's a note here saying that you guys are looking at that separately and that's going to be coming back. But I am curious about how it interacts within the strategic plan, how that financial context is going to affect what you're doing. You know, there are a lot of financial challenges coming for the cities and, the funding sources for Valley Metro, I think, will be affected. And so we just have to be thoughtful about that financial context. And I would like to know a little bit more about how that works within the plan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Paniagua. The reason why the financial plan is not included within the scope that we're doing with Guidehouse is that much of the financial planning takes place outside of Valley Metro in coordination with MAG when it concerns the regional tax, in coordination with our member cities and towns regarding all revenue streams. And so that takes place with Ken Kessler, Chief Financial Officer, and our finance team, who are also working to develop a long-range financial plan for Valley Metro that is driven by these external programs. We're also going to be interacting with our capital and operating budget beginning in the FY25 cycle. And so as we refine those strategies and tactics and their specific measures, the FY25 budget, which is in development right now, is going to reflect where we're going in the strat plan. So it's very much related, but not something that we want to have the Guidehouse team presenting and engaging with, because that, again, as you all know, that happens at a different forum.
I appreciate that. I think the one thing that I would ask or would want to see is a focus on cost efficiency and just making sure that's part of the decisions that are made as part of the strategic plan and the goals that you have. And even how you measure. So I think that's just something that needs to, I understand what you're saying in terms of the bigger picture analysis that's being done, but on the day-to-day decisions, making sure that cost efficiency is a consideration as well.
Absolutely. And I don't want to give the false impression that this is a fiscally unconstrained plan. Absolutely, cost effectiveness is a key component that's driving our selection of those specific tactics. Not only what can we afford, but what can we reasonably accomplish in a 5-year horizon.
Sure. It maybe kind of spurred a follow-up question regarding kind of the financial modeling. So on one end, it looked like it was identified that some of our areas that score the lowest from a customer satisfaction is related around the security element. And I think it was pointed out really clearly, there's been a lot of, again, social economic dynamics that have probably caused that. On the other end, we've also have been reluctant as an agency to modify fares. And I think the thought being, well, if we maintain a lower fare structure, that will lead to improved ridership. And so what I would hope is you're looking at this, I know that the agency is going to be going through and doing that review, but what you may want to try to ascertain is, would your ridership grow if you could ensure higher level of security? In other words, would they say, we'd be willing to pay an increased amount of daily fare to be assured with these other kinds of components? Sometimes we think the only reason for ridership is based on affordability, and that may not be the only issue. So I'm hoping that if you have this fair discussion, that what you may find, some of the formers or those that are using it less, the security issue is number one, not the money part of it, but we can only do so much security within the constraints of the agency. You're balancing out ridership hours and versus, kind of these other kinds of controllable costs. So I would hope you would at least be looking at that part of it.
Yeah, so we are currently in the process of a fare policy study right now. That is the outgrowth of the current fare collection modernization. So that's the equipment, the types of passes, the technology. And now we're looking at the fare policy, which includes what kinds of pass programs do we offer and how much do fares cost. And then security, as you mentioned, Mr. Phelps, is also another piece, and that is included in the strategic plan. We're not directly connecting level of security to the price of the fare. The security is connected directly to how we collect fares and what types of tools and instruments. It would remind us that our passenger fares comprise an important portion of our operating budget, though they are not the lion's source of the budget. Passenger fares are typically going back into general revenue, so they're supporting everything that we do, including the cost of fuel and operators, including but not limited to security. So we're looking at each of those and not necessarily a causal relationship. And we do know that within transit, the elasticity with respect to fares, it's real. It is real.
I see Mr. Burke from Peoria has his hand up.
Yeah, is there a way to, I think it's the next slide. There was a great slide that kind of broke down the multi-purpose choice riders and former riders by kind of what they valued the most. It was a nice, that's the graph. Yeah, right there. Okay. So, and this was more just to see it again. Just building on the conversation that's been there. I mean, certainly it looks like, kind of where the affordability sits, where the security sits, does seem to differ depending on which group we're targeting here. So it feels like, kind of maybe to Mr. Phelps' point, is that former riders' affordability it's one of the higher, but it's not the driving factor for why they were former riders. It could be the security was a driving factor for why they're a former rider. Anyways, I just thought that was interesting data of how we can connect these to the tactics that you've got going. That's it. Really no question. I just really wanted to see that chart again. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I am not seeing any. Thank you for the presentation. We look forward to further information as we progress on this plan. Thank you. And that was for information only. So the next item, travel expenditures and solicitations. It's information only. No comments? It just says information only. Okay, no action required. And current events, no information?
This is a question for the members of the committee. If there's anything happening in their cities or any events that they want to bring
Thank you.
to this and announce here, they can do that. Or they can, it's also an opportunity to ask for any future agenda items they would like staff to have on this agenda.
Thank you, Pat.
Sure.
Any future agenda items or comments, events? I am not seeing any. So the next meeting of the TMC RMC is scheduled for Wednesday, January 3rd. Wow, already 2024 at 11 a.m. I know. So it is time now to convene the TMC meeting. And the consent agenda is presented for action. We do have consent agenda item 1E-ADA paratransit and ride choice operations management system modifications is being pulled from consideration today and will be brought back for future action. Consent agenda item 1F-AJO service route 685 IGA with Regional Transportation Authority of Pima County is being pulled from the consent agenda for separate consideration. So we have that is being pulled.
Yeah, so we need a motion.
And a second?
Second for items 1A through 1D.
For the consent agenda.
Yes.
So I move the approval of consent agenda. 1A through 1D, so we said that?
Yes.
Yeah. Second.
Okay. Any further comments, questions? 1D?
We just need a call for the question,
Call for
for
the
the
vote.
approval.
Call for, okay. I'll call for the vote. Thank you for all your help. This is my first time. I'm getting used to it. All right, so call for the vote on other consent agenda items.
Let's vote for the, I'm making a motion to approve the consent items 1A through 1D.
Okay.
Kevin seconded. You can
Yep.
call the vote.
Call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It passes.
Now we'll,
We have to consider 1F separate.
Yes.
yes. Mhm.
Yes, needs to be, 1F has been pulled for consideration. Staff recommends that TMC forward to the Board of Director authorization for the CEO to execute IGAs with RTA of Pima County for the operation of Rural Route 685 for trips originating and terminating in Ajo, Arizona, and to amend contract number 23025 with MTM Transit to provide Rural Route 685 for short trips in Buckeye, Arizona. That is a mouthful.
I move approval, a motion to approve item 1F.
Second.
Do you have something to say? What you're saying, Jessica?
I just wanted to invite the opportunity, if the Madam Chair approves, for questions. I believe a committee member had questions, and Tom Young, our Deputy Chief for Bus and Paratransit, is on hand for discussion on this item.
And I do see Mr. Burke from Peoria with his hand up.
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this was one that I was asking to pull. I don't know if Tom wants to just give a presentation and then ask questions thereafter, or if you want me to just jump right into kind of the three thoughts that I have on this.
However you'd like to proceed.
Okay. I guess.
Would you like a presentation?
I thought when I had the ability to talk to Tom, I thought it was very enlightening because my first question was just kind of, how do we get into this business, this service? And so does it make sense for us to continue this service, and under what circumstances is there delivering it? And it seemed like Tom had a lot of good thoughts on that. So I think it may be worth having him walk through that again, please.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Burke, Chair Reed, members of TMC RMC. Rural Route 685 is a route, we actually implemented it in 2005, and it originates in Ajo and runs up to Desert Sky Transit Center here in Phoenix. One of the stops, Ajo runs in to Gala Bend, where RTA out of Tucson actually pays for the service from Ajo to Gala Bend, and then Valley Metro picks up the responsibility of that route in Gala Bend, Maricopa County, to come up the Desert Sky. In addition, part of this route also includes some short trips in the Buckeye area that actually gives midday service in Buckeye. There's actually 5 trips midday. So This service is the only service that this rural community has to include Buckeye right now. One of the service attributes of this route is it's not a pure express route or a pure fixed route service, especially in Buckeye. We run it as a flex service. So what the flex service means is it is a fixed route with designated stops. However, if people with disabilities or seniors that live within 3/4 of a mile of that route cannot get to the service, they have the ability to pick up the phone, call and make a reservation and say, when the bus is going through this area, I would like it to deviate to my place to pick me up. So it's a combination of a fixed route service and a deviated or demand response type service all in one. In 2021, when the current contract that was operated, excuse me, was getting ready to expire, since this actually, the route originates in Pima County, we met with RTA of Pima County and decided to do a joint procurement. So their service that starts in Ajo does run into Tucson, where the service that we were funding through a rural federal grant actually was Gila Bend into Desert Sky, and then they were operating from Ajo to Gila Bend. So we did a joint procurement thinking, and which it did happen, is if we can both award a contract to the same organization, since that area is so far out, that we would get better costing, better pricing, and in the long run, better service quality. So we did the joint procurement. We awarded the contract to Second Generation, or known as Ajo Transportation. Ajo Transportation actually is the firm that had been running the service for over 20 years. Right before the service implementation in 2021, Second Generation did receive a very large insurance increase from what they had proposed, and they approached both Valley Metro and RTA and said, to really operate this, we need an increase. That first year, it was just a couple days before the kickoff of the service. We went ahead and approved the increase, and they continue to provide service. This year, right before the insurance renewal, they came forward to both RTA and Valley Metro, once again with a substantial insurance increase. We immediately contacted RTA to see where they were sitting with that request. And both of us at this point felt that the insurance increase was way too much for us to entertain. And at that point informed Second Generation that we would not be authorizing. Kind of long story short, fast forward, she agreed that she can continue to operate till January 20th of this year. So we're looking at different options of how do we ensure the service can go forward. RTA has a second service that they procured through a competitive process with another provider, and they had actually included the Ajo service in that competitive procurement, kind of as a backup, just in case Second Generation missed a trip or didn't have operators that they had a source. So as we talked with RTA, we talked about entering into an interlocal agreement to where our portion of the long trips, with an interlocal agreement with RTA, they could just add this service to their contract that was competitively procured, and we keep the service whole. A couple of the areas for us is making that trip. That's a lot of deadhead to use one of our providers up here in the Phoenix area. We didn't have timeline to actually do a full procurement process. So entering into the IGA with RTA seemed to be the best solution for a quick turnaround. We're in the process right now of working with RTA of what that will look like. Same area, looking at the Buckeye short trips. For their provider to actually deadhead all the way to Buckeye, we felt that was a cost that didn't needed. But through our demand response services contract, we do have a provider right here that can provide the service in Buckeye. And we don't have to modify contracts as we wrote these contracts. It was for expanded demand response service, so it fits right into the current scope. So what we're looking at today is for the authority to enter into the interlocal agreement for all of the long trips that originate down in Ajo, and then move the short trips beginning January 22nd to our existing demand response service provider, so that service is kept in place. Couple of the questions Mr. Burke had asked, and I did do some research, so I'll kind of proactive answer these right now, and then if I miss any, I'm willing to answer more. One, the funding source for this is through federal rural dollars, or the 5311 program, which covers 50% of the operating cost. The other 50% currently is our regional dollars that matches that. Our fare for this service, if an individual is traveling within their community, it's $2. If they're actually crossing a border and going into another community, the fare is $4. That's for a one-way trip. And then all the reduced fare, half fare apply to those for eligible individuals. We average, depending on the day of the week, each trip is anywhere between 5 individuals and 16 individuals that consistently use the service. It's offered 6 days a week. A lot of the individuals that are using this service fall into, I have no other way to travel if the service wasn't in existence. Another high usage is from the Native American tribes down in that area, getting to their employment, which the closest for their employment is primarily the Gila Bend area. So that's kind of the background on the Ajo service, or Rural Route 685, and also the request of what we're looking for authority to enter into the IGA with RTA and move the short Buckeye trips over to our demand response provider. I can answer any other questions at this time.
Thank you. It looks like Mr. Burke, you have a question?
Yes, please. Thanks, Madam Chair. So thanks, Tom. Great explanation. This one just caught my attention as kind of a atypical service coming from outside the county and certainly outside the Valley region of the membership. And so understanding that we are providing resources, meaning, 50% of the cost of this, it seemed like while this solution seems like the ideal way to solve this in the short run, it maybe presents the opportunity to re-examine, should we be in this service, or maybe there's a different way. Is this service consistent with our mission, consistent with our operating structure? And if yes, is the way we're delivering it the best way? And then I guess the third question I'd ask is, can any of our partners participate differently rather than in just purely federal money and Valley Metro money? Might there be resources that tribal partners can access that we can't, that could lend to this service? So I guess my just thought to the board and to staff was, can we use this as an opportunity to maybe re-examine this route, looking at those pieces? So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I am not seeing any, and I believe we had a motion and a second on the table. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I'm not hearing any. Motion passes. And any reports or current events or future agenda items from the board? I am not seeing any. So the next meeting is Wednesday, January 3rd, 2024 at 11 a.m. Thank you.
Okay, and I will convene the Rail Management Committee meeting. We have the consent agenda presented for action. Are there any questions or requests for discussion to be pulled for separate discussion? If not seeing, oh, do you have one?
No, I'm sorry. I was
Okay.
gonna make a motion to
Okay,
approve the
yeah.
consent agenda.
All right, I'll take that as the motion to approve the consent agenda. Can I get a second? Second. Got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, and that's our only action item today. Any reports on current events that anyone wants to share today? Seeing none, next meeting is January 3rd. This was the right year to be chair of the Rail Management Committee. I don't think we've had a meeting over 30 seconds. So thanks, everybody.